Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Outpost. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're picking up with last week's episode. The whole situation is, well, now that Tobin's here, what do we do? Because for all we know, Tobin might be infected, but if he's not, we need to warn him. But it's like, if he is infected, if we bring him to us, Yavalla will be able to see and hear what he knows. So it's like, what are we going to do about that? But it's like, well, we really don't have much of a choice. We still have to get him, because if he's not infected, we need to get to him beforehand, because if they get Tobin, they'll get Tobin's entire army. So we have to figure that out. And obviously we have Tobin and Rosman, Gwen's, it's like, oh, like, let's do our thing. And obviously for him, he's like trying to make excuses because he wants to tell her, but he's reluctant to, because the sad thing is, once again, it was about power and position beforehand, but now it is truly he loves Rosman, and he's, he doesn't want to lose anything. He doesn't want to lose her, but, he made this choice because he thought what was necessary. Because the sad thing is, now that in his mind, it's like, oh, Yavalla and Gwen are working together. It's like, oh, then I kind of married Felicita for nothing. And, I sacrificed my own happiness because he was trying to do it for the greater good. But it's like, it wasn't worth it in the end. I mean, at the end of the day, you might even make the argument it may make things worse, because it gave him an army that now gives Yavalla potential an army. We'll get to that soon enough. But it's like him making excuses like, no, I'm gonna go wash and everything. And I love that, like, Talon and Garrett attack him, and they put a hood on his head so he didn't see what was coming, but he was defending himself until he got knocked out. They dragged him, and I love Janzo being like, okay, here we go again, because there's too many damn times that people just slid bodies down that little ramp into his. It's like, oh, here we go again. It's happened too many times that I'm not even bother counting anymore. But it's the whole situation of, like, what are we going to do? If he's conscious, then he's going to potentially find out if he is infected. So what are we going to do? And I love Garrett tries to put on, like, a different, deeper voice. And he's like, spears? And Garrett's like, was it really that obvious? And then, like, Zed's whispering to Garrett. And he's like, is that Zed? And then it's like, oh, I bet you Genzo's here too. And he's like, oh, how would you know that? Why would you even think that? It's like, because I'm in a cage. This is one of the few places that has a cage. Plus, it smells like booze in here. So it's kind of like, well, what do we do? So they have to check and see if he's infected or not. And they don't really know how to. And it's the whole situation of, like, yeah, like, what did you talk to Gwen about? I'll try to tell her about the fact is I married Felicita. They're like, what? Excuse me? Because obviously Garrett loved her at one point in time. So it's like, wait, you betrayed her. Talon's like, wait, you betrayed my best friend, which I love. Jen's being, wait, I thought I was your best friend. I was like, she can have more than one best friend, Jen, so stop being so jealous. Which is so ironic, considering he calls her out for being quote-unquote jealous later on. It's a whole thing. But it's the whole, it turns out we have Zed using his kinge on Tobin, and it makes him dance and, like, put your arms up, and he's like dancing. He's like, no, I'm not going to dance, and he starts dancing, and, like, everyone's laughing at poor Tobin's expense. But it's like, okay, so if I'm able to control him, that means that he's not infected, because kinges can't work against kinges. So, but what I thought was interesting, though, is when the conversation came up between Yavalla and Gwen, that it's like, yeah, we might have to kill Talon. She's like, whoa, no, Talon's like my best friend. Like, we'll like, bring her over to our side. It won't have to come to that. And I'm like, that's so interesting, because in that moment there is enough of Gwen left that she was able to fight back. No, we're not going to kill Talon. Like, if there's a strong enough emotion connection, like, and that they have such deep ties, they've known each other for so long, that is become like her best friend. So it's like, I'm not going to kill Talon. But then Yavalla's control over her was like, yes, if I have to, of course I'd protect you, High Priestess. So, but it's. I think maybe it also depends on the person, depending on how strong-willed they are. Maybe the stronger your will, the easier it is to break with the kinge, or maybe it can never fully control your mind. It's probably like when she laxes her control over you, because she ends up talking about it later on. She can't see through everyone's eyes at the same time, because it's too much for her mind to handle, so she has to do it, like, focus on one person at a time. But she's saying, I guess, eventually, maybe when she gets strong enough, she'll be able to eventually control everyone to fully be of a one complete mind, that mind being hers. But I think that was so interesting, though, because So I think it shows that if she's not fully pressing you with it, that there is some semblance of you still there that can be pulled back. So now they have to make a choice of how they're going to handle this whole situation. Like, they could get the Rosman, and it's like, when they get the Rosman, maybe they can, because the whole point was to potentially get Yavalla, but it's like, we'll get Yavalla, she'll just bring a whole bunch of Black Fist here to take us down. So what do? So Tobin goes to her anyway. Tries to I love the whole conversation too, because it's like, oh, we're supposed to be in this together, but the moment Zed was like, oh wait, I thought you said we were supposed to be in this together, the moment it was like, oh, you betrayed my best friend and everything, like, that whole conversation coming up. But trying to take Gwen, it didn't stop, because it was interesting, because it's like, why didn't you infect him when you had a chance? And Gwen was like, yeah, because mine hadn't divided yet. I was like, that's interesting. So it's not immediate, as Janzo kind of phrases it. There's a not digestional. That's not the word he used, but basically there's a division period. It's not immediate. It's not like, oh, I want to affect you. Because I was wondering why she didn't just do it at the end of the last episode. I was like, was there some part of her that just didn't want to do it? Because it's like, oh, I don't need to do it. I mean, to be fair, Yavalla was going to do it to Ren. So, but I was curious, like, what was the reason behind it? And it's like, oh, because there is a period before it divides and it can pass it on to someone. I was like, that's fascinating. So I thought that was like, we learned actually a lot of interesting things about this Kinja, and obviously we'll get to it soon enough. But obviously it turns into a battle, everyone defending Gwen and Yavalla, and sadly it ends with Sammy dying. I was like, that sucks. It's not what Talon wanted, but it was enough that I think whatever pieces of Rosman were holding on, being like, no, Talon, we don't have to kill her, she's my best friend. The moment she killed Sammy, it's like the infection in her head just spread. It's just like, oh, Yavalla had already whispered those words to her and put her in her mind of like, oh yeah. And so it was already there, the suggestion was already there, and I think it just completely took over. It's like, Yavalla was right, you deserve to die or whatever. And it's like, damn, that sucks. It wasn't on purpose, but it's like Sammy just wouldn't, it's just a bummer that it came down to that. We also found out that like Zed tried to take control of one of the Black Bloods that are, or Black Fist or Black Blood that was defending her, and it turns out that his Kinj can control her. So it's like, wait, I thought it could, and at that moment I was like, but then if it can work on her, why didn't it? Does that mean Tobin could actually sadly be infected? But I was like, no, because that wouldn't make any sense. But it's like, and he tries it on Yavalla, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work on the Queen. Like, the others are just kind of lesser versions of the Queen, so it doesn't have the natural protection like a normal Kinj would. So he can't do it against her Kinj, but he can against anyone else that's infected, which is, once again, another interesting fact. But obviously they end up locking up Gwen and Yavalla. Obviously Garrett tries to come speak to her, because Garrett knows a thing or two about control. I'm surprised he didn't bring that up conversation-wise, but it's like, you're stronger than this, you can break free. And it's because he knows more so than anyone what it's like to be under someone else's control. But, Yavalla had him and he stabs her. I was like, oh, shit. I was like, wait, so how's this all going to play? I was like, is she actually going to pop up like nothing's wrong? Lo and behold, she pops up like nothing's wrong. So it's like, okay, so not only can her Kinj divide and basically control other people, it can also give her some form of immortality. My mind immediately was like, well, you stabbed her. That doesn't mean she can't die. Normal wounds probably won't kill her. Makes me think, probably have to go by zombie rules. Probably have to destroy the brain. Because to be fair, where is the Kinj? Because the Kinj is up here on your forehead. It probably the Kinj latches onto your brain probably. So it's probably a situation of you probably have to disconnect like her brain stem. So you probably have to cut her head off. That's what I'm thinking. I mean, this is kind of a medieval fantasy thing. If you're going to do like, this is the time period and setting for lopping off heads. Sadly. So that might be the only solution to this situation, because Janzo's the one that had suggested they might have to go about killing her to Ren, which obviously Talon was like, that was stupid of you to do that. And he was like, what, are you jealous or whatever? It's like, no. Her standing up to her mom and not be controlled is one thing. Asking her to kill her mom is another thing. I'm just letting you know. So it's like, you should have never, because I thought he was immediately going to suggest, well, it's kind of what I thought last episode. It's like, if you kill the Queen, the rest of the hive's going to die. But it's like, that means killing Yavalla. I'm like, that's what I brought up last episode too. Like, I'm wondering, will it work like that? Will, like, would you have to kill Yavalla to kill the Kinge, or could you kill the Kinge without? It might be a situation where you probably have to basically kill. I mean, because that was the whole thing about Reb. She wanted to kill Talon last season, because it's like if you don't give the Kinge over willingly, which that might actually be a situation where like you'd have to give it over willingly, but it's like Yavalla would never give it over willingly. So either you give it over willingly or you kill the person and you take it. So that's the question, though. Like, it might be a thing with the whole, like, obviously they brought up the whole thing about, like, black bloods don't like water, right? So it might be a thing of, much like you did with Garrett, you might have to, obviously they faked his death, but it's like maybe you have to kill her and then resuscitate. Try and, like, if you kill her long enough for the Kinge to leave, and then you can resuscitate her and it'd be fine. That could be another, so who knows? But with all of that kind of going on, circling back really quickly, prior to the whole Janjo situation was the whole Zed and Rin situation, because telling Rin, like, okay, you have to know. She's like, okay, my mom's like, no, I have to go see her. It's like, no, you can't. It's like, your mom lied and deceived us. If you out of any person would go, you're her daughter, you're most likely to be more sympathetic so she can manipulate. It's like, because I'm her daughter, it might put me in a position where I could be the only one to speak to her, because she's saying, like, this has to be the Kinge, you know. But that's the big question, and that's the question I'd asked before too. Was this just the Kinge? Is the Kinge doing all this, you know, or did Yavalla know about this from the very beginning, and this was always her plan? Is this the Kinge distorting the plan she already had, or was this always, you know, that's the question that it's curious, like, you know, who's the chicken and who's the egg in this situation? You know, was it Yavalla's plan, or was it, like I said, the Kinge shifting and, you know, contort, you know, because that's so interesting, because you would think it had to be her plan, because the Kinges don't change anyone else. I mean, it really changed Talon, and it didn't change Zed, but to be fair, this could be a special Kinge. I mean, obviously the way it operates is very special, but I mean, that's just probably its unique abilities, but that doesn't necessarily mean these things necessarily 100% have a mind of their own. Maybe not. Like I said, maybe this one in particular does, you know. But another interesting thing we learned about it is that this Kinge can also work on animals. Like, the Kinge can pass on animals because she infects a rat, which that rat then infects Tobin, and Tobin sets everybody free. Obviously, things are probably going to get complicated the moment eventually it's going to get revealed, oh yeah, like, I married Felista, and how that whole situation is going to how that's going to affect this unity. Well, eventually it's probably going to be like, oh, we're going to go back there and we're going to affect everyone, so Felista and Gwen are probably going to be like, oh, we now know the truth, but it's like, we're going to be in this together, so it might turn into like him having multiple wives type of situation. They might kind of implement it like that, because obviously Yavalla needs, it could be that, or it's going to be a thing of either Talon or Gwen or Yavalla or somebody is going to kill Felista, so it can put him in a position where he can marry her and so have all that power. But it could just be, like I said, a thing of having both. You could have Gwen as your queen and also have Felista as your queen, meaning like you have so much power, so that might give her more control on the more human side of things. But we also learned something else too, that the pain that I talked about, like Sammy looked like he wasn't in the best condition last episode. I was wondering if it affected humans a different way than it does Black Bloods. It's like, no, when it's splitting, if you don't pass it on quickly enough, it will hurt you. Like, Gwen started feeling like crap. It's like, it takes a couple days, but if you don't send it off, it will kill you eventually. If you don't go, it's almost like, it's like basically having poison in your body, and unless you pass the poison on to someone else, you know, which also begs the question, eventually you run out of people and creatures in this. You would think eventually, if you keep spreading around the world, you'd eventually run out of people and things. So eventually everyone would, it'd take a long ass time, but eventually everyone would die, because it only takes a couple days for it to finally kick in, right? So like, people would eventually die because, there's no one else to infect, or it would take you forever to get to other people to infect. So eventually it would get to that point. So you'd kind of be on like, am I overthinking it? Most likely, but I feel like that's another angle of this, of kind of putting, you know, time on a clock of like how much time you have to kind of stop this, because not only will it spread, but if people don't pass it on soon enough, they die, you know. So that's kind of an interesting, in my personal opinion, it's an interesting angle to the whole situation. One of my favorite aspects of this episode was the whole Mutt and Rin situation, like them bumping into. He's like, oh, okay, I'll go this way and you go that way, and then he still went the wrong way. I love it. I'm like, Mutt, you are the MVP. And she's like, I'm so frustrated. He's like, oh, you're angry. She's like, what? No, I'm not. It's like, you're clenching your fist. And he's even like, oh yeah, look, the veins in your neck. She's just like, what if someone had said that they would kill your mom? And it's like, well, she's already dead. She's like, right. If she was alive, he's like, wait, someone's going to try and resurrect my mom just to kill her again? It's like, no. He's like, oh, you're just saying if someone, he's like, I'd rip them before. She's like, yeah, squish them until their eyes pop. It's like, yeah. And she's just like, but for her, she feels so complicated about it. And I love that Mutt was eventually like, oh, you're mad at someone. You want to kill somebody. She's like, yeah. And it's like, oh, it's Janzo, isn't it? She's like, how'd you know? He's like, I always want to kill Janzo. But I don't because he's my brother. I can't let you kill my brother. She's like, I'm not going to kill him. It's like, okay. Because he even gave her, he's like, do you want a hug? She's like, no, I don't. She's like, Mutt, let me go. I don't want a hug. It's like, you lovable oaf, you. And he just feel like, promise me, you have to promise me, I'm not going to kill your brother. You promise me, you have to give me a word. He's like, Mutt. And he just she kind of walks away from him. Like, I love you so much, Mutt. You're the best. But obviously she confronts Janzo and it's like, well, there's a whole situation. And like, she's like, I've got this, feelings because I'm mad at you, but at the same time, like the way I'm flustered and the way my heart's beating, she's like, I think this is love. And it's like, oh, dude. And she's like, have you ever had this feeling before? He's like, yeah, once before with my sister. She's like, your sister? He's like, yeah, but that was before I knew it. I was like, you just had to open that can of worms, didn't you? But then it turned, it's like, this is the first time for her. She's like, so I'm bad at it. He's like, you're perfect at it. And they kiss, and she's like, aren't you going to say it back? He's like, well, isn't it obvious? It's like, yeah, and since we're being open and honest and everything, I have to tell you, the fact is your mom can't be killed. It's like, Garrett kind of accidentally stabbed your mom in self-defense, but she can't be killed, so, hey, so went to go check on her. Oh, she's gone. They've been gone for a while. Oh, turns out they left and took Tobin's army with them and everything. So it's like, okay, so what do we do? Everyone's asking questions like, yo, where's Yavalla and everything? It's like, okay, where's Gwen? Okay, here's the truth. Wait, Garrett's still alive. Yep. So what's going on? Yep, give everyone the lowdown. So it's like, Zed has to tell everyone Yavalla's promise for, paradise was a lie. Her kinge, the way it works and everything. So Talon, having been she kind of, balances both because she's lived with humans and been amongst humans, and the same thing, with the black blood. She is a black blood, everything. So she represents, she pulls for both sides. So now she kind of, is the leader and kind of runs things. Zed oversees the Black Bloods, as her second command, and Garrett's her second in command, overseeing the humans. So it's like, reluctantly she has to take charge, but she's only doing this until this whole thing's dealt with. But then I love the whole situation with Genzo looking at Ren, and then all of a sudden sees the rat, and it's like, whoa. She's like, how'd you see it? He's like, I was staring at you while you're sleeping. He's like, I mean, not in a creepy way, just, in a protective way. I'm like, once again, Janzo, you don't have to say everything that's on your mind. You didn't have to say all that, but it's like, now they figure out the rat it's like, oh my god, she can infect animals too. So this one infected Tobin. They kind of figured it out, but it's like, it's like, wait, this thing's looking at us. It's like, it's following Janzo every time he does something, and it's like, and then she's like, oh my god, it's like my mother's watching everything we do, and they move to the side, and the rat's following, and the rat kind of covers up, because it's like, oh my god, how much did she see? So she wanted to probably see what they were up to, but probably also infect Ren, because if she could get Ren on her side, because she had talked about it, like, oh, we have to make necessary sacrifices. She was suggesting killing Zed. I thought she was going to say Ren. Zed, she's willing to get rid of because he has a kinge, and that means, like, he's not someone she can control. Ren, on the other hand, it's like, yeah, she might have denied it, but especially if I get a rat to sneak in and infect her, it's cool beans, Especially because it's like, don't worry, I could get you and Janzo under my control. So, but, now that they have no choice, because it's like, where she's going to go next. She's most likely going to go to the capital, most populated place to spread the infection. So what are you going to do when you find her? It's like, we don't know. We'll get to that bridge when we cross it, because we know we can't kill her. Once again, I'm assuming decapitation is the only means, but obviously Ren's not going to be too happy about her mom dying. So it's like, we got to find some other solution to deal with this, especially because, who's to say that will 100% work? But, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, because obviously, it's like Janzo had said it to, like, Garrett after Garrett had done it. It's like, you don't know what could have happened. Also, Garrett's, once again, and Talon had made the whole point of this, Garrett's super ruthless now, because after he's like, well, good riddance. It's like, I don't know. Like, yes, Yavalla's bad and everything, but it's still just kind of like, he is not the Garrett that we knew before. Like, after having his brain scrambled the way it was, it's understandable, but it's just like, you can definitely tell he's not the, I don't know, there's just there's darkness in him that, yes, there was darkness there, but that light in him has grown a little bit dimmer than what it was before. It's kind of how I take it, But, sets up a lot of interesting things as we see at the end of the episode. Yavalla goes to a village and spreads it even further. So it's like slowly but surely, village by village, until they get to the capital, they're going to be amassing a massive army. Like I said, how this is all going to turn out is definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.